Hey, how's it going? Today I am talking about how to change your running gait to prevent injury. This is Running to the Castle, a podcast for injury-prone Run Disney runners on a journey to running magical miles. Join me, Dr. Allie, as I share the secrets I've gathered as a runner, doctor of physical therapy, and coach. You'll learn the exact ways I get my clients to the castle strong without feeling broken or held together with KT tape as they cross the finish line. Okay, so as you may know, if you've been in my world for any length of time, I don't think there's any one particular full form way to run for anybody that works for absolutely everybody. There is one change that I do recommend people make. So some people ask, well, should I run on my toes? Is it okay to heel strike? I heel strike or midfoot strike when I'm running, or I am, they say I scissor when I run. Like, what exercises to do to change my running gait? So for the most part, I don't recommend changing much of anything. There's one thing I do recommend changing. And if you've listened to my podcast before, it was about shoes. I talked about it just a very little bit at the end. If you want to go back to that podcast, I will link it in the episode. So the one thing I do recommend everybody change, and it's not actually an injury prevention thing, it's more of an efficiency thing. And I used to run this way, and then I've changed it to now how I recommend people run. And I saw a huge difference when it was explained to me for why you should change it. And it was actually an easy thing to change. Easy. It was simple to change. It took a simple step. It was hard to focus in the beginning, but now I do it without even thinking about it. So I used to run and heel strike with my leg way out in front of me. And really, it's not way out in front of me, but compared to the new way of running, it is. So how do you know if you run this way with what I'm calling your foot way out in front of you? If you can look down and see your foot out in front of you, then when you land, then you know you're running that way. But really, have somebody take a video of you running, and you'll be able to see it. What you want to do instead is run with your feet under you the whole time. So keep your feet underneath your hips. And does it prevent injury? Maybe. I didn't do any research on it, even though I do work with injury-prone people and people who are struggling with injury as they're training for Run Disney races. Yes, that is the subset of people that I work with. However, I didn't do like a big study on it, but if you think about it this way, you are going to want to change how you run as well. So the way it was explained to me was you are putting one big doorstop in front of you when you run, when you land with your leg out in front of you. Okay, right? Like we all know the doorstop, the angled doorstop, right? That you put under the door so that when you try and open it, it literally stops. That's why it's called a doorstop. It stops you from running. So I normally don't go all into the physics or anything, but I think a little bit is needed with this. So the way physics and biomechanics work is you have an equal and opposite reaction to everything you're doing. So when you hit the ground technically hits you back with equal and opposite force. So if you slam down on the ground's going to slam back up at you. Okay? When you are running and your leg lands in front of you, you have an equal and opposite reaction going straight up your leg. So if your leg is out in front of you, you have force pushing you backwards, so to speak, because that's an equal and opposite energy. Okay? So think about if your leg is out in front of you, I'll turn sideways if you're watching, you have an equal and opposite force coming straight back at you. If instead it's under you, you have an equal and opposite force going straight back up you. And it's not fighting you because you're still going forward. So by the time you get past it, it's still going straight up. Your previous steps force. If you are running with your leg out in front of you, as you're trying to move forward, you still have that pressure and that force coming back at you, slowing you down. And at a 90-degree angle, it slows you down the most, and you're not hitting at a 90-degree angle, you're hitting at a 30 or a 45-degree angle. So it slows you down, not at its max, but it's slowing you down enough. Whereas if you keep your leg underneath your hips, that force is going straight up through your body, through your belly button, through your head, and out into the sky. And you're already past it. So from an efficiency standpoint, do you see how that's a big doorstop? You're putting the brakes on your running. We don't want to put brakes on our running. So switch it up from landing with your leg out in front of you and have your hips underneath you so that you have that force going straight up. So that's the number one thing that I recommend everybody change, and it has nothing to do with injury prevention. But injury prevention wise, there are a few things you can change, and this will depend on what your injury is, how heavy-footed you are, and what type of shoes you're wearing. Because shoes that have more cushion, they're going to absorb impact, but you want to have the least amount of impact on your joints, because impact is going to affect your joints as opposed to your muscles. So somebody who has arthritis or a meniscus problem, or I'd say those are the two. So this is mainly for knee problem people, but you could also have hip arthritis or ankle arthritis, but the knees tend to feel it the most. If you're landing on your heel, then we talked about that force going straight up. Well, that force goes straight up and lands at your knee. It goes straight through your ankle, and based on how you land, it doesn't go through the middle of the ankle joint, most likely, either in front or behind a little bit. And then it kind of ends at the knee because just how much force goes through. And so you get a lot of impact at your knee. If instead you land on your toes when you run, the impact can be absorbed partially by your muscles. So the way this works is when we land on our heel, our Achilles and our calf muscles are not in spring position. They're not ready to spring us forward. They are in stretched position. And so the next place for the impact to go is to the knees and the quad. But if your knee is relatively straight, your quad is not in spring position. It's actually in full activation mode. Quad makes your knee go straight. Again, I don't want to talk about all the physics, biomechanics of it. I have to just a little bit for this podcast. If you have questions about it, please send me an email. But if you land on your toes, so your heel's off the ground a little bit, your Achilles and your calf muscles are in spring mode. So they're ready to absorb. So what happens is you land on your toes, and this is going to be exaggerated. You're not going to be landing on your tiptoes like a ballerina. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see me using my hand. So imagine my right hand here is my foot. If you land on your toes, then your heel can come down, so your Achilles is eccentrically working to absorb some of that force. And then some of the force it goes through the Achilles and through the calf muscle, and then it goes on to the knee. Also, if you're landing on your toes, you're also not landing on a straight leg. When you land on your heel, you're almost automatically landing on a straight leg just based on the biomechanics of how your ankle and your knee have to work together. But if you're landing on your toes, you're probably landing on a slightly bent knee. So then your hamstrings and your quads can absorb some of that force because they're in spring mode. They are ready to activate because the quad straightens the knee. So if your knee is partially bent, then your quads are ready to activate. And if your knee is slightly bent, your hamstrings are also ready to activate. Whereas if your knee was fully bent, your hamstrings are not in spring mode. They're not ready to activate. It would be the opposite of, it would be like when you landed on a straight knee and your quads weren't ready. Okay, so if you land on your toes, your Achilles can absorb some of the force, your calf muscle can absorb some of the force, which most of your calf muscles do make up your Achilles, so you get that whole aspect of it there. Then you're also landing on a slightly bent knee, and so your quads and your hamstrings are ready to absorb that. And your muscles are ready to absorb that force and then distribute it again to propel yourself forward. So it actually holds on to that energy to propel yourself forward. Whereas if you land on your heel, it goes straight through the bones and the joints. There's no retention of that energy. It just compresses everything. And it doesn't feel good, and you can't use it. So that would be one way to prevent injury at your knee for how you're running. Okay? So that's all I have for you today. As always, thank you so much for listening. You can always find me on Instagram, runDisney DPT. I am the runDisney Doctor of Physical Therapy, helping runDisney runners who are injury prone or struggling with injuries as they're training for their race cross the finish line without feeling broken, so they can cross, feel strong, and not like they're held together with KT tape. If you have a specific question, go ahead and hit me in the DMs on Instagram, or you can email me directly, amarty@dralleypt.com. And if you found this valuable, please share it with somebody else who you think will enjoy it. All right, that's all for now. Talk to you soon.